Chair recognizes Mr. Schoolcraft to explain the substitute to the amendment to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is actually a pretty big deal. It's a few $1 billion involved here. This is a substitute because Representative Bernal is actually addressing an area that I'm also going to address. It's going to get a little complicated. I hope I can explain it to help folks understand. Members, this amendment will raise the basic allotment by $1,444. That's $1,444 per student without increasing the cost of this bill. I actually got my inspiration for this bill from our own Chairman Buckley. Now, I'm not saying he's for this amendment, but just before we passed this bill out of committee, I wrote down some of his words, and he said, "The fairest and most equitable way to fund public education is through the basic allotment." I agree. I think there's almost universal agreement. The basic allotment takes money and it funds it equally for every student in the state of Texas. Members, the basic allotment is very easy to understand. As I said, it takes a single amount, gives it to every district equally across the state. But piled on top of that basic allotment is layer after layer of complexity. Seriously, is there anyone in this chamber who is not frustrated with the sheer complexity of our school finance system? Is there anyone in this chamber who thinks it's a good thing that we have a school finance system that spends $101 billion and yet nobody understands it? I want to give you one example of how this screwed up system distorts things. I printed out from the TEA's website the PEIMS data for 2 districts. This is the actual financial details submitted by those districts. I happen to choose Dallas ISD and Cypress Fairbanks ISD. They're both significantly larger than 100,000. They're big districts. They're comparable districts in many ways. Now, you would think they would have approximately comparable funding per student. But off of these, if anyone wants to come look at them, you would see that on the line operating and other revenue, Dallas ISD has $18,673. Cypress Fairbanks, has $13,614. Members, that's a $5,059 difference per student between those districts. That means that Dallas is getting $703,686,664 more than Cy-Fair. Or let's look at the grand total operating and non-operating expenditures line on these printouts. Dallas ISD gets $22,990 per student. Cy-Fair gets $16,000, and that's a difference of $6,943. What that means is we would have to fund and give Cy-Fair $743 and $528 more in order to fund them at the same amount per student as Dallas ISD. Well, you think, well, must be because Cy-Fair is a wealthy district, right? Well, again, further down on these reports, it shows that local property tax from M&O, i.e. generated locally, Dallas generates $8,903 per student. Cy-Fair generates $3,731 per student, significantly less local revenue. Members, this is just an example, but let's talk about how to fix this mess. Members, the way to increase the basic allotment by $1,444 without spending more money is to rip out a huge chunk of the complexity in our school finance system and begin distributing more of our tax dollars through the simple to understand, fair, and equitable basic allotment. So let's talk about how this amendment funds the increase. The increase will be funded by repealing what very well may be the biggest scam in the entire state budget. It's hiding in plain sight in the Texas Education Code. If the basic allotment is the fairest and most equitable way to fund public education, the compensatory education allotment is the exact opposite. Now, what I'm doing, I'm addressing the compensatory education allotment just like Representative Bernal, except he's just taken the part he wants and putting it in his program. I'm saying we repeal the whole thing and put it into the basic allotment. That comp ed allotment is convoluted, politically manipulated, and it's a grotesque distortion of how we distribute the money in this state. Under this bill, the comp ed allotment will redistribute $5.8 billion without regard to any kind of logical plan. Again, I said it will distribute $5.8 billion. Now let's talk about allotments. We keep talking about those. Let's make sure we're all on the same playing field here with understanding. Our school finance system uses a concept called allotments. The basic allotment is a dollar amount that schools receive for every student. In addition to the basic allotment, there are allotments such as the special education allotment, the gifted and talented allotment, the career and technical education allotment, and the bilingual allotment, and there are others. But those ones I listed are all student-based allotments. That meaning that those allotments fund schools for the costs of services provided to the student who generates the funding. You have a student in one of these programs, we fund it. Let's talk about the comp ed allotment on the other hand. Instead of funding based on students receiving services, the compensatory allotment is completely different. The funding for the comp ed allotment is not generated based on students receiving services. The compensatory education allotment is calculated and dispersed to school districts almost entirely based on the number of enrolled students who are on the federal free and reduced lunch program and who live in low-income census blocks. These students are called educationally disadvantaged. Keep in mind, there is nothing that requires any specific services be provided to the students generating the comp ed funding. Let me repeat that. There is nothing that requires any specific services to be provided to the individual students who generate the funding. So let me review what I've said. If we do not adopt this amendment, the compensatory education allotment in this bill will redistribute $5.8 billion to some school districts based on the number of students enrolled in the district who now live in low socioeconomic blocks and who are on the free and reduced lunch program. Members, here's another very important fact to remember about this allotment. The compensatory education allotment is calculated as a percentage of the basic allotment. That means every time we increase the basic allotment, we flood more money into this comp ed allotment. For example, if this amendment is not adopted, the modest increase in the basic allotment included in this bill will add another $454 million.
Ms. Richardson, for what purpose?
Not at this time.
The gentleman does not yield.
This bill will add $454 million to the already bloated comp ed funding. Here's another really important fact to keep in mind.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Extend.
When you yield for questions.
The gentleman's time has expired.
Motion to extend.
Members, is there objection? Chair hears none. The gentleman's time is extended.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, members. All right, this is a very important part. The comp ed allotment, oh, I already covered that. Let me go on. Sorry. Teacher salaries. Anyone here interested in teacher salaries? Members, in this bill, 40% of increases in the basic allotment go to salaries. Teachers are the ones who will have a massive benefit from this change. Let me get back to my reading. Under this bill, funding for teacher salary increases is also tied to the basic allotment. The bill specifies that 40% of any basic allotment increase must be used for salary increases. This amendment provides for a $1,444 increase in the basic allotment. That would result in a tremendous teacher salary increase, at least funding for that. So to review, this amendment raises the basic allotment by $1,444. It yanks out a huge piece of complexity that's in the education code. It increases teacher pay, and it does all of this without increasing the cost of the bill. I'll yield for questions.